disturbing accusations reached the ears of Constable Williams at Nathalia Police Station in the Goulburn Valley, 230 kilometres north of Melbourne, in Victoria, in 1886. Two young women, Eliza Bristol and her 15-year-old sister Esther McCarran, had realised their sister Jane McCarran was pregnant again. She had been pregnant before, in 1881 and 1883, they informed the policeman. The children had been born, but they had never seen them. Worse, they suspected the father of the children was their own father, William McCarran. William McCarran was born in Ireland in 1843. He married Martha Donnell at Listymore, County Tyrone, in 1862, and they had two daughters born in the Emerald Isle before emigrating to Australia in 1870. The eldest daughter was Eliza, who married an American emigrant and Civil War veteran 20 years her senior, named Charles Bristol, in 1876, while still in her mid-teens. The second daughter was Jane, born on the 28th of April, 1865. Two more daughters and 6 sons were born in Australia, although 2 of the boys died young. They settled on a 320-acre farm on the flat open plains in the district of Kaarimba, 20 kilometres from Nathalia, in 1871. The family was said to be peculiarly reserved and exclusive in their habits, although scandalous rumours of incest had been public knowledge for 4 or 5 years, which kept many neighbours away. Some McCarran cousins also lived nearby, and the family had a reputation for being noisy and quarrelsome when drunk. Martha McCarran died of breast cancer on the 14th of March 1887, at the age of just 44. It was later alleged in court that even on the day of the funeral, McCarran had sex with his daughter. 2 detectives from Wanganoo had endeavoured to prove the accusations, but had failed to obtain evidence. Still, Constable Williams was haunted by the claims of incest and of what had become of the children. In January 1889 he had spoken to Jane once more, who didn't know he was a policeman, without result. It was noticed that Jane kept out of the way if strangers came to the farm, and that William was always on the alert for strangers. Williams became a detective himself, and in May 1889 learnt that Jane McCarran was pregnant once more. Williams watched the family farm night and day for 3 weeks. From the 8th of June he was assisted by Sergeant Alfred Sainsbury. As the long days passed, Williams must have begun to doubt the case would ever be resolved satisfactorily. Then at about 8 o'clock in the morning, on the 10th of June, William McCarran and his daughter Jane were seen walking together to an old stable and buggy house. The building was kept under observation through field glasses for several hours before the pair re-emerged, Jane being helped back to the house by her father. She resumed her household duties, even milking the cows and making butter before nightfall. Sainsbury made his way covertly to the barn and looked about, but found nothing. After dark the 2 policemen again quietly slipped into the barn and made an examination. They discovered bloody rags on the floor, and then the tiny body of a newborn baby girl, wrapped in an old bag and concealed under the seat of a buggy. Sneaking back to their observation point, on damp ground behind a log fence, they maintained their vigil. The other McCarran children were observed searching the paddock during the cold night. 2 of them walked close to where the police were concealed without seeing them. It appears they knew the baby had been born and abandoned, and hoped to find it alive. Nothing else happened that night, nor Tuesday morning, as the police shivered with cold. Williams left to go and get some food and drink, while Sainsbury maintained the watch. At 3 p.m. William McCarran went to the barn, and transferred the body of the infant to another bag, which he then filled with marshmallows. With the bag slung over his shoulder, he walked to the house, dropping the bag outside by the door. Sainsbury approached and called on McCarran to come out. When he did, Sainsbury challenged him on what was in the bag and what he had been doing with his daughter. McCarran said there was only stuff for the pigs in the bag, and strenuously denied the charge. Sainsbury summed up the situation. McCarran was a blacksmith and a farmer, born in Ireland 46 years before. He was a large, dark-complexioned man, powerfully built and strong, standing 5'9" and weighing 12 stone. Sainsbury had been weakened by exposure and lack of food during the long watch, and hesitated to try to put cuffs on McCarran. He drew his revolver and ordered the suspect to put his hands up, which he did. Then Sainsbury fired a shot to get the attention of Williams. Instead, the McCarran family came spilling out to see what was happening. The sergeant asked Jane, who was crying, to put the bag at his feet and then tossed down the handcuffs and ordered Jane to put them on her father. But his wrists were so large they would not shut. Instead, Sainsbury got one of McCarran's sons to get a trap, and McCarran and the body were placed aboard, with the policeman standing on the axle with his revolver cocked. Then the McCarran boy drove them to Sorensen's hotel in Kaarimba. All the while McCarran appeared poised to make an escape bid, but they arrived at the small town, where they were joined by Detective Williams, and McCarran was taken on to the lockup at Nathalia. While McCarran was charged with wilful murder, Senior Constable Brown and Dr. Drinkwater proceeded to the farm and examined Jane. It was proven she had given birth. Dr. Drinkwater also examined the baby. She weighed 8 pounds and was 21 inches in length. She had lived for about an hour, and as there were no marks of violence on the body, but there was chaff in her larynx, the cause of death was determined to be suffocation or strangulation. The actions of McCarran, as observed by the police, now made sense. A few days before the birth he had penned up a large sow and had starved the animal. It appears the dead baby was to have been fed to the pig. Mr. Johns, the coroner and magistrate, was appraised of the case and immediately ordered the arrest of Jane McCarran on the 26th of June for murder. She was arrested and joined her father in the Nathalia police station. They were shortly thereafter transferred to Shepperton Jail. The other children at home, who ranged in age from 18-year-old Esther down to 10-year-old Robert, were said to have been fully aware of the relationship between Jane and their father. It was suspected that he had interfered with his other daughters as well, and that he was a violent man who terrorised his children. Esther gave evidence of his treatment of his wife, Jane, and herself, which had led to her obtaining a job in 1888 as a domestic servant so that she could spend some time away from the family farm. Martha, aged 16, was also a domestic servant. Eliza said she had not spoken to either her father or Jane for the past 2 years. The illicit relationship with his daughter began before Martha died. It was recalled that Jane was pregnant in 1881, 1883, 1886, 1888, and 1889. The presumption was that William had murdered all 5 of them. The last words McCarran said to his dying wife were, "You bloody bitch, I ought to have killed you long ago," said while raising his hand as if to strike her. Martha replied defiantly, "Kill me if you like, William, but you know that I could give information to the police about what you did with that child of Jane's that would hang you." Jane was pitied by the people of the area, as it was believed that she was mentally challenged, although there was reason to believe this was an act. The medical officer of Beechworth Jail declared Jane was neither an idiot nor insane, but was easily led. At any rate, she proved herself a willing partner in the relationship following the death of her mother. On the 19th of October 1888, she had travelled to Echuca, and there, under the assumed name Jane Donald, she married her own father. Meanwhile, Detective Williams and Sergeant Sainsbury had been investigating the McCarran farm for any evidence as to the other children. Floods had hit the district earlier in the year, but with the help of the McCarran children, 2 small bodies were found. They were found buried about 3 feet down near a stump in the paddock near the old barn. Both were in now decayed wheat bags. One yellowed skeleton seemed to have been in the earth about 3 years, and was wrapped in the roots of a prickly pear, and the other about 18 months. The skeletons were taken to Melbourne for examination by Professor Allen. The inquest took place in July 1889. McCarran was known throughout the district, although he was not a popular member of the community. Families arrived in Nathalia from Shepperton, Namurka and the surrounding farms in their Sunday best to witness the sensational proceedings. Feelings of indignation were high against the pair. In court, Jane, who was 5'6", with brown hair and grey eyes, with a squint, was plainly dressed. Her face was dull and blank. William displayed no emotion. Esther McCarran's evidence confirmed the observations by Williams and Sainsbury. She added the information that Jane was sick at breakfast on the day she gave birth. both William and Jane were committed to trial for infanticide. It was realised that the only specific law making incest illegal in Victoria was under ecclesiastical law, which Parliament quickly rectified in the Crimes Act of 1890, assigning a maximum term of 15 years imprisonment. In September, Sergeant Sainsbury, who had joined the police force in 1878 at the age of 22, was promoted to detective. The trial was to have been held at Shepparton, but was delayed, and the venue altered to Sandhurst, southeast of Melbourne. It opened on the 16th of October, with many people travelling down from Nathalia and Kaarimba districts to observe. Dr. Charles Drinkwater, who had examined Jane and the children's remains, had by this time died. On the 1st of September he was found dead in bed, a handkerchief over his face and a bottle of chloroform on a table beside him. The doctor was known to have a weak heart, and it is thought in using the chloroform to relieve catarrh and neuralgia he had accidentally killed himself. His sworn evidence from the inquest was read out in lieu of his being able to attend. One of the jurors, William Bede Sr., informed the judge that he was an atheist and was dismissed from the jury. When the final jury was impanelled, 8 of them were grey-haired men over 50. Mr. Purvis, the lawyer appearing for William, made much of McCarran's physique, saying if he had suffocated the baby, his huge, rough hands would have bruised the body. Instead, he said it was more likely the act of a woman, and accused Jane of killing the baby. The jury were told to weight the evidence and to put the repugnant aspects of the relationship to one side, as the pair were not on trial for that. They retired for 75 minutes, and returned to pronounce that William McCarran was guilty of manslaughter, and Jane guilty of concealment of birth. The following day, the 19th of October, their sentences were handed down by Justice Kerford. The first sentenced was William. William McCarran, you have been tried by a jury of your country, and you have been found guilty of an offence, which I am glad to say rarely comes into our courts of justice, and which is one accompanied by circumstance of the most horrible description that could befall mankind. You, the father of a large family, living in a desolate part of the country, have degraded yourself, and that unfortunate woman, your daughter, to the level of the brute beast. You have been guilty of an offence which shocks humanity. Every man and every woman in the community would feel shocked and outraged at the suggestion of such a thing. It is an outrage on civilization and everything that supports the fabric of the great social system. You have been brought to justice by the efforts of the constables, Sergeant Sainsbury and Detective Williams, who in their duty to society underwent exposure and fatigue for the purpose of bringing you to justice. It came out in evidence in connection with the offence of manslaughter, of which the jury have found you guilty, that woman has borne to you 3 other children, who have never been seen, leading to a strong presumption of the diabolical crime which you have been committing. Had you been found guilty of the capital offence, I have but little doubt that you would have paid the penalty by the forfeiture of your worthless life. The sentence of the court is that you be imprisoned, with hard labour, for 10 years, the first 5 days of the 6th, 9th and 12th months of each year, except the first year, to be spent in solitary confinement. While considering the gravity of the offence, the term is not long. This terrible confinement is such that it will make you live over and over again the wretched life you ought to be ashamed of. The prisoner was removed from the court, and Jane faced her sentence. Jane McCarran, I am sure that the feelings which agitate me must be shared by every man in this court and outside the court. Grievous pity for you in the unfortunate position in which you have been placed today. There is no evidence of how this highly degraded conduct commenced. It commenced probably when you were too young to resist and resent, and it has grown under the dominion and power of that man who just stood by the side of you, and is unfortunately your father. I am sending you to prison, not so much for punishment, as to break off those old associations by, after you come out, by going away somewhere to earn an honest living. You are sentenced to 12 months' imprisonment, with hard labour. The sentences, it was said, were met with general satisfaction. In November it was announced that the Chief Commissioner of Police had agreed to rewards being paid to Sainsbury and Williams for their part in the investigation. Sainsbury received £30 and Williams £20. Sainsbury eventually became the Chief Commissioner of Victorian Police from 1913 to 1919. In February 1890 it was reported that while in jail, Jane admitted to having given birth to 4 children. She also said over and over again that she would wait for her father to come out of prison and that she would live with him again. Jane McCarran was released from custody on the 1st of September 1890. It is believed she may have moved to South Australia. Wherever she went, she vanished into obscurity. William was a beneficiary of special remission to celebrate the 60th Jubilee of Queen Victoria's reign, and was released from Pentridge Jail on the 25th of June 1897. He moved to New South Wales and died at Boree Creek on the 19th of July 1902. His son Robert McCarran died in 1896 at the age of 17. Martha married in 1897 and Esther in 1904. Eliza Bristol continued to live in the area, at Kattunga, as a well-known and respected member of the community, until her death in 1935. The effect on William McCarran Jr., who shared the same name as his infamous father, was however said to have been so profound that he ended up fleeing Australia. It is thought he went to the United States, where he married and had a family of 7 sons. The events remained strong in the memory of the community for some years. When a similar case occurred in 1897, it was compared to the Kaarimba Horror.